Hi, and welcome to DrupalBrief. This is an AI-generated summary of another video, podcast, or blog post. If you want to learn more about what's being discussed here, then please go check out the source. This podcast is produced by the team at DrupalForge. DrupalForge is the new #1 open-source development and hosting platform. It has all the functionality of the expensive platforms, but at very affordable prices. If you're looking for a new hosting provider, contact us for a demo before you get locked in. Okay, that's it. Make sure to click subscribe, and here we go.
Okay, so today we're going to dive right into something pretty major that's been happening over in the WordPress world.
Yeah, it's been quite a conflict and pretty public, too.
Yeah, involving Matt Mullenweg, the co-founder of WordPress, and WP Engine, which, if you're in the WordPress space at all, it's one of the big hosting providers out there.
Yeah, and this isn't just about, the gossip, right? Who said what to whom.
Right.
This goes deeper. We really want to look at what this tells us about how open source works,
Yeah, exactly.
Like the big ideas behind it.
Yeah, and for our listeners who I know appreciate getting to the heart of things quickly, today's episode is going to be super useful. We're going to use a presentation by George Deat as our main guide here. He's the co-CEO of Palantir.net.
Yeah, he's deep in the Drupal world, but what he had to say really applies across open source,
Totally. He gave this talk at DrupalCon, and thankfully we have a transcript. So that's our main source material.
Yeah, she'd give us a really good framework to think about all this WordPress stuff.
So to kick things off, where did all of this drama even begin?
Well, it seems like the fuse was lit at WordCamp US.
Oh, yeah, right back in September last year.
That's when Matt Mullenweg basically went public with his accusations against WP Engine.
Yeah, he didn't hold back at all.
No.
As George Deat laid out in his presentation, Mullenweg's main issue was that WP Engine built this, very successful, $500 million valuation successful business.
Huge, yeah.
On top of WordPress.
Right, leveraging all that open source goodness.
But according to Mullenweg, they weren't contributing back to the project and the community in a way that he felt was, proportionate or even fair.
Yeah, that's the heart of it, isn't it? What's the balance between taking and giving back?
Exactly.
And then on top of that, you had the whole trademark issue that Mullenweg brought up, too.
Yeah, right, about how they were using the WordPress name and all of that.
Right, so it's already getting heated.
And it didn't just stay at, the talking stage.
Oh, no, things escalated quickly.
WordPress, and really we mean Mullenweg and his company Automattic, they took some really big steps, really concrete actions.
And some would say drastic. Remember when they basically cut off access to WordPress.org for WP Engine and all the sites they hosted?
Oh, yeah.
That was huge. That's the central hub for WordPress.
For plugins, for themes, for support.
Everything. And suddenly, a big chunk of the WordPress world is locked out. That's a power move.
Imagine you're running your business on WordPress and boom, you can't access WordPress.org anymore. It would be chaos.
Totally. And then, remember they made everyone on WordPress.org certify that they weren't connected to WP Engine.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
You had to basically declare you weren't on their side.
It was like picking teams in school. It felt strained for something as big as WordPress.
Very much so. And then there was the Advanced Custom Fields plugin situation.
Oh, ACF. Yeah, that was a whole other level.
So this plugin, it's super popular among WordPress users, right?
Oh, yeah. Essential for lots of sites.
Exactly. And it was maintained by WP Engine. But Automattic, they basically took it over.
Yeah, they released their own version, a fork of the original.
And then eventually, they just removed the original ACF from WordPress.org completely.
Poof, gone.
Which, you can see why people were upset, right? It's to the core of what open source is supposed to be about.
Yeah, for sure. And it felt like the pressure kept mounting. There were reports of Automattic offering discounts to WP Engine customers if they switched hosting providers. Plus, they even had this public tracker to show how many were jumping ship.
It did feel like an all-out campaign. They were really going for it.
Aggressive, for sure.
But it's important to remember that WP Engine didn't just sit there and take it. They fought back. Legally,
Right. In December, they managed to get a preliminary injunction.
Which, from what I understand, reversed some of the most drastic stuff.
Yeah. The access to WordPress.org was restored for WP Engine customers, right?
That's right. And that whole certification requirement. Gone.
So at least that part of it calmed down a bit.
It did, for now. But those discounts Automattic is offering, and that migration tracker.
Oh, yeah. Those are reportedly still there.
Still going strong, yeah. So the tension hasn't gone away. And on WP Engine's side, They came out swinging, too.
Yeah, they weren't just going to be quiet about it all.
They accused Mullenweg of straight-up attempted extortion.
And they're claiming that his actions have already done some serious, lasting damage to their business.
Yeah, so this is way beyond just like a disagreement, right? This is a full-blown legal battle.
Oh, yeah, like heavy-duty legal stuff.
Right. As it stands, the actual lawsuit is set for early 2027.
Wow, that's a long way off.
Yeah, though as with these things, they could always settle out of court before it actually goes to trial.
Right, of course. But even without, waiting for a verdict or anything, this whole fight has already had a pretty big impact on WordPress itself and the community around it.
Yeah, like shockwaves.
We've been hearing about some big names in WordPress, really respected developers who've decided they've had enough.
Feeling disillusioned? Yeah. Some have left on their own. Some have, well, let's just say they were encouraged to leave.
And for anyone out there who depends on a project, whether it's WordPress or something else, that loss of talent, it's a worry, right?
Definitely makes you wonder about the future of the project if the people who built it are walking away.
And it goes beyond just the developers, There were reports that access to WordPress.org was even limited for a while, like around the holidays.
Oh, yeah, right. New users couldn't create accounts.
Plugin uploads were affected. And Mullenweg, he basically said it was because of all the stress and the burnout from this whole WP Engine fight.
Which, regardless of what you think about who's right or wrong, it shows how personal these conflicts can get.
Yeah, it's not just business, it's people's lives and their well-being that are being affected.
Exactly. And this next one, this could be the biggest impact of all. Automattic has actually said they're going to dial back, like significantly reduce their contributions to WordPress core.
Really? Because of the lawsuit?
Yeah, that's what they're saying. And remember, historically, they've been a huge contributor.
Like the biggest by far, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if they pull back, well, it's hard to say for sure, but it could mean delays for future updates. Maybe new features get pushed back.
Yeah, the pace of development could really slow down. And it's not just the core project.
Right.
Some WordPress agencies, they're saying their businesses are being hurt too.
Yeah, it's that ripple effect, right? The whole ecosystem gets shaken up.
Uncertainty, bad press. Nobody wins when a project gets dragged through the mud like this.
And it makes people wonder, what are the rules of the game here? What are we all agreeing to when we participate in open source?
Exactly. And that's where George Deat brings in this really interesting concept, social contract theory.
Yeah. He applies it to open source, which is super insightful.
Yeah, can you break that down for us? What is social contract theory and how does it fit into this whole thing?
Okay, so imagine a society, any society, right? It's all based on these agreements, right?
Yeah.
Like unspoken rules that we all kind of agree to follow so we can live together, even if we don't always talk about it.
Right.
Think back to like Rousseau, way back when, or Locke. They were all about this idea that we voluntarily agree to certain things, like giving up some freedoms to get the benefits of being part of a community.
Right, like giving up some individual power for the collective good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what Deat says is this applies to open source too. It might not be a country with laws, but it's still a community. And there's a social contract there too.
Interesting. So, what are the unspoken rules in the WordPress community? What's their social contract?
Well, you can kind of piece it together, right?
Yeah.
Like if you look at the WordPress.org about page or the Make WordPress section.
Oh, yeah, where they talk about their values and stuff.
And some key ideas jump out, like WordPress will always be free, always open source. It's for everyone, they say. And there's this big, welcoming, inclusive community supporting it.
Okay, so those are the ideals, right?
Exactly. Not legal documents, but guiding principles. And for you, the listener, if you're part of WordPress, those ideas probably shape how you think the project should work.
Right, like your expectations of how people should behave.
Exactly.
And so this is where Mullenweg's beef with WP Engine comes in, right? He sees their behavior as breaking that social contract.
Exactly. He's saying, look, WP Engine, you built this huge business. Remember, $500 million valuation.
Yeah, we get it, $500 million.
Right. But they did it all, he argues, on the foundation of free labor. The work that thousands of people put into WordPress without getting paid for it.
Without giving enough back.
Right. And he's saying maybe they confused users about whether they're officially part of WordPress or not.
Ah, yeah, that blurring the lines thing.
Right. And that all of this hurts the project as a whole, hence the cancer analogy he used. Harsh, but you get the point.
Yeah, strong words.
And from his perspective, that breaking of the social contract, that justifies what he did, the drastic actions.
Okay, so that's Mullenweg's side. But like Det pointed out, there are a lot of people in WordPress who see it totally differently.
Oh, yeah, like flip the script entirely.
They think Mullenweg's the one who broke the social contract.
Because they're saying that when he locked people out of WordPress.org, when he took over the ACF plugin,
Yeah.
that was the real violation. And then the way he handled it all publicly, being so confrontational, kind of dismissing longtime contributors, it really shook people's trust in his leadership.
Yeah, like if he can do that to WP Engine, who's next?
Exactly, that's the fear, right?
And then there was that really surprising thing Det revealed about who actually owns WordPress.org.
Oh, yeah, that was a bombshell.
It's not the WordPress Foundation, like some people might think.
Nope, turns out it's personally owned by Matt Mullenweg. Just him.
Wow. For you, listening, think about that for a second. The entire WordPress world revolves around this website, and it's controlled by one person.
That's a lot of power in one person's hands. So yeah, if he can do all this to a big company like WP Engine, what's stopping him from doing it to anyone?
That's a good point, which is why this whole idea of governance in open source projects is so important.
Totally crucial. And Deat made a really good comparison with Drupal because their governance model is very different.
Yeah, how so?
So with WordPress, it's all pretty centralized, right? Like we said, Mullenweg controls WordPress.org.
Right.
The WordPress Foundation does exist. They run the WordCamps, but Mullenweg's on their board too. And then Automattic, his company, they're the main force behind WordPress development.
So it's all very connected.
Tightly. Whereas Drupal, it's much more distributed. Drupal.org, that's run by the Drupal Association, which is a nonprofit.
Okay, so there's a separation there.
A big one. And the local Drupal camps, those are pretty independent. And while Dries Bytart, he's like the Matt Mullenweg of Drupal, he also started a company, Acquia.
Right.
But the governance, it's more spread out, less about one person or one company calling all the shots.
Which, for someone who uses Drupal, that might be a good thing. More stability, maybe? Less chance of one person just deciding to change everything.
Potentially, yeah. And this difference in how they're governed, it plays into how they handle trademarks too.
Ah, trademarks. So open source code, like under the GPL, that's pretty much free for anyone to use and mess with.
Right. Share it, modify it, all that.
Yeah.
But trademarks, they're a different beast.
More controlled.
Much more. So with WordPress, the trademark, it's owned by the WordPress Foundation, but only for stuff that's not commercial, like WordCamps.
Okay.
For anything involving making money, that trademark is licensed exclusively to Automattic.
Ah, so they get to say who can use it for business stuff.
Right. And they can even sublicense it to others. So Automattic has a lot of power there.
Yeah, like the name WordPress is super valuable.
Hugely. And they control how that value gets used in the marketplace.
Okay. And how's Drupal different in that regard?
Well, the Drupal trademark, that's owned by Dries Bytart himself, personally.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But he seems pretty open about letting people use it. Like, for stuff that supports Drupal, you don't even need permission to use DrupalCamp for a local event.
As long as you're not doing anything shady with it.
Right. No negative events or anything like that. But if you want to use Drupal in your company name, or if you're implying you're officially endorsed, then you do need his written permission.
Okay, so it's a bit more open than WordPress? Less centralized control, maybe?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah.
And all of this, the governance, the trademarks, it ties into how each community approaches the whole contributing thing.
Right, like who's actually doing the work to keep these projects going?
Exactly. And Deat laid out some data on that, which is really interesting.
What did it show?
Well, you got to remember, measuring contributions, it's not an exact science, right?
Right. Different projects track things differently.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But even with that, the difference between Drupal and WordPress is pretty stark.
Yeah.
So in Drupal, they have this system of certified partners.
Oh.
And lots of them contribute to Drupal core development. Now, Acquia, Bytart's company, they're the biggest contributor.
Makes sense.
But they're still just a relatively small piece of the whole pie. And contributions, it's not just code, right? It's community stuff, sponsoring events, it's all sorts of things.
So a pretty diverse group of people and companies are pitching in.
Yeah. That's the impression you get. Now, with WordPress, Deat looked at a specific release, version 6.6.
Okay.
And guess who was credited with over half of all the contributions?
Automattic.
Bingo. No other single entity even broke 6%. And what's interesting is WordPress doesn't really track contributions the same way Drupal does.
Ah, so it's hard to compare apples to apples.
Exactly. We don't have the same level of detail on community contributions or plugin stuff, but the picture we get is definitely more centralized. Like, Automattic is the driving force.
Which makes sense given everything we've talked about, right?
Totally. And all of this leads us to what Deat calls the maker-taker problem. Dries Bayard really brought this idea to the forefront.
Yeah, I've heard of that, but honestly, I'm not super clear on what it means. Can you explain it?
So in any open source project, you've got people who are putting in the work. They're investing their time, their skills, their money.
Right, the builders, the creators.
Exactly, the makers.
Yeah.
And then you've got folks who are mostly focused on using the project to grow their own businesses.
Without giving as much back.
Right. They're taking more than they're making.
Yeah.
And Bayard's point is, if you have too many of these takers, it can really discourage the makers.
Yeah, look, why bother putting in all the effort if someone else is just going to swoop in and reap the rewards?
Exactly. It can create a real imbalance, and ultimately the project suffers.
So it's not that every company is either a pure maker or a pure taker.
Right. No, it's more of a spectrum.
Yeah.
Like most organizations probably do a bit of both.
Right. It's about the balance.
Exactly. Like, is what they're putting in roughly equal to what they're getting out? That's the key question.
Makes sense. And this isn't just a WordPress thing, is it?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It's a challenge for pretty much any open source project.
Yeah, I can see that. Okay, so let's talk about the money side of things.
The financial side.
Yeah, because all this infrastructure, these platforms like WordPress.org and Drupal.org, that doesn't run on goodwill alone.
No. Servers cost money, staff needs to be paid, all of that.
Right. So what did Deat say about the costs involved?
Well, for WordPress.org, it's kind of hard to pin down an exact number. We've got some conflicting figures. Mullenweg has said some things in interviews, but then there's also legal filings, and they don't totally match up.
So is it hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, or is it millions?
Yeah, it's a bit murky. But with Drupal, the Drupal Association, they're super transparent. They publish their financials.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. They say Drupal.org costs them about 1.3 to 1.4 million bucks a year to run. And that includes everything, hosting, salaries, the whole shebang. And being a nonprofit, that changes the whole funding picture, right?
Yeah, they're not trying to turn a profit. So how do they cover those costs then?
That's a good question. And it leads to how each project tries to encourage contributions, right?
Right. Like, how do they make it worth it for people to give back?
So WordPress, they have this program called 5 for the Future.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of that.
It's basically a pledge. They ask companies and individuals to dedicate at least 5% of their time or resources to WordPress.
Okay. But is it like a requirement?
No, it's more of an aspirational thing. Like, if you care about WordPress, you should do this. And the benefits are kind of fuzzy. Like, oh, you'll be more involved in the community. You'll get a good reputation.
So warm, fuzzy feelings, but not much else?
Pretty much, yeah. Drupal, they have a more structured approach. Their certified partner program.
Okay, tell me about that.
So it's a paid sponsorship thing. There are different levels depending on how much you contribute.
Ah, so it's like a tiered system.
Exactly. And you get tangible benefits, marketing exposure, discounts on events, recognition within the community, like real concrete stuff.
So a bit more like a business transaction. You pay, you get something in return.
Yeah, which might be more appealing to some companies, right? It's a clearer value proposition.
Makes sense. And this whole maker-taker thing, it seems especially relevant when you think about the hosting companies.
Oh yeah, the companies that are literally built on top of WordPress or Drupal.
Right. Their entire business model depends on this open source software. So what's their responsibility to contribute back?
Exactly. That's what Deat is getting at. He says these companies have an additional obligation.
Because they're benefiting so directly.
Exactly. Like more so than someone who just uses WordPress for their blog, for example.
Right. And he points out that with Drupal, while Acquia is a big contributor, some of the other major hosting companies, not so much.
Yeah, which raises the question, what's a fair level of contribution?
Right. If your whole business is based on this free software, what do you owe back to the project?
Tough question, right?
Yeah.
And it brings up this really interesting way of thinking about open source as a common pool resource.
Common pool resource. Not sure I follow.
So think of something like a public library or a community garden, right? It's a resource that everyone can use.
Okay, I see.
And there's this classic economic theory, the tragedy of the commons, which says these shared resources, they tend to get overused and depleted.
Because everyone's just looking out for themselves.
Exactly. But then you've got Eleanor Ostrom. She won a Nobel Prize for her work on this. And she showed that communities can manage these resources successfully.
Really? So how does that apply to open source?
Well, Deat uses Drupal as an example. So one of Ostrom's principles is clearly defined boundaries, right?
Okay.
So the Drupal Association, they could, for example, limit free access to super expensive resources.
So not everything is free for everyone all the time.
Right, you need some rules, some limits. Then another principle is matching rules to local needs.
Okay.
So the Drupal Certified Partner Program, it has different costs depending on the company's size and how much they contribute. It's flexible.
Tailored to each situation. What else?
Well, there's participatory decision-making. The Drupal Association Board, it has community members on it, and they get feedback from the community. They're not just deciding in a vacuum.
So it's more democratic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you've got monitoring. Drupal has a whole system for tracking contributions, giving people credit. And if someone tries to game the system, there are sanctions.
So they're keeping an eye on things.
Yeah. And there's a community working group, so there's a way to resolve conflicts. The Drupal Association's legal status, that gives their rules some weight. They're recognized.
So it's all pretty well thought out.
Yeah, they've got systems in place.
Yeah.
And Deat points out that even Drupal could do better,
Oh, really? How so?
Well, he thinks they could learn from what's happening with WordPress, actually.
Interesting. Like, learn from their mistakes.
Yeah, in a way. Like, find ways to be more proactive about holding each other accountable for contributing back.
Okay, so to wrap things up, for someone listening to all this, what are the big takeaways?
I think what this whole WordPress conflict shows us is that these unspoken agreements, these social contracts in open source, they're really important.
Yeah, they matter.
And there's this constant balancing act, right?
Yes.
Between the people who benefit from open source and their responsibility to contribute back.
Right, the makers and the takers.
Exactly. And looking at how WordPress and Drupal do things, it shows there's no one right way to govern a project or to encourage contributions.
But there are lessons to be learned from both, for sure.
Definitely.
Well, for you, the listener, we hope this deep dive has given you a much better understanding of this whole WordPress situation.
Yeah, and how it connects to the bigger open source world.
And we'll leave you with this final thought.
Yeah, thinking about open source as this common pool resource, what do you think is the responsibility of the people and companies who use it?
Right, to make sure it stays healthy and sustainable.
Exactly. It's something to think about.
For sure. All right, that's it for today's deep dive.
See you next time.
Okay, we're done. To close off this podcast, I just wanted to remind you that this brief was a fully AI-generated summary, and we take no credit for the original content. If you want to learn more, then check out the source. This podcast is produced by the team at Drupal Forge. Drupal Forge is the new #1 open-source development and hosting platform. It has all the functionality of the expensive platforms, but at very affordable prices. If you're looking for a new hosting provider, contact us for a demo before you get locked in. And if you like this podcast, hit subscribe, post a link on social media, and recommend it to 2 friends. That's it. See you next time. Bye for now.